My name is Faith Mercer. I'm 34 years old. And for as long as I can remember, my family had a role assigned to everyone. My sister, Jolene, was the beautiful one. My brother, Caleb, was the brilliant one. And me? I was the ugly one. That was the word they used. Not once. Not by accident. Repeatedly. Casually. In front of relatives, neighbors, teachers, anyone willing to listen. Last July, at my family's annual reunion, my Aunt Patricia introduced me to a woman I had never met before. And she said, word for word, "This is the one we don't talk about." I was standing right there, 34 years old, surrounded by over 40 family members. But what none of them knew was this. That woman was not some random guest. And what happened next changed the way my family saw me forever. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where real emotions meet life-changing moments. If you've ever been the one your family dismissed, overlooked, or pushed to the side, this story is for you. Tell me in the comments what role your family gave you. I read every single one. And if you're new here, subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I was 6 years old the first time I heard it. Jolene was 8. It was a Sunday in June, and my mother was sewing matching dresses for all the girls in the family. My cousins got one. My sister got one. Even my aunt's stepdaughter got one, and she had only been part of the family for 4 months. Everyone got a dress except me. When I asked why, my mother barely looked up from her sewing. "Jolene needs something nice," she said. "She photographs well." I got Jolene's old Easter dress instead. Yellow. Faded. There was a stain on the collar, and my mother didn't even try to clean it because, as she put it, it won't show in pictures. She was right. I wasn't in any of the pictures. That afternoon, we drove to my grandmother's house for a church potluck. I remember standing outside in that stained yellow dress while my Aunt Patricia held Jolene's face in both hands and said, "This one is going to break hearts." Then she turned to me, tilted her head, and said to a neighbor, "That one got the Mercer nose. Poor thing." My mother heard her. She was standing only a few feet away. She didn't correct Patricia. She didn't say, "That's cruel." She didn't defend me at all. She laughed. A small, soft laugh, like Patricia had only said something obvious. I stood there, 6 years old, in that yellow dress, believing ugly must be something temporary. Like dirt. Like the stain on my collar. Something that could be washed off. It wasn't. Years later, I would learn that my mother had studied architecture for 1 year at community college before she got pregnant with Jolene at 19. She dropped out, married my father, and never drew another building again. But I didn't know that then. All I knew was this. My sister got a new dress. And I got a label. Once that label was attached to me, everything else fell into place around it. School pictures? Every year, order forms came home in the fall. My mother bought the full portrait package for Jolene. Large glossy prints. Frames for the living room wall. For me, she checked the smallest option. Wallet size. Cheap enough to ignore. Mine ended up in a kitchen drawer with expired coupons and dead batteries. Birthdays? Jolene had themed parties. A princess party at 7. A spa party at 10. A pool party with a DJ at 12. My birthday was 3 weeks after Caleb's, so my mother combined ours every single year. The cake always read, "Happy birthday, Caleb." And then, squeezed underneath in tiny frosting letters, almost as an afterthought, Faith. Christmas morning? Jolene opened carefully chosen clothes, matching sets, shoes, coats, accessories. When she turned 14, she got a beautiful winter coat with a faux fur collar. I got books. "You like reading, right?" my mother would say. But it never sounded like a question. It sounded like a decision, as if she were telling me who I was allowed to be. My brother Caleb had his own role too, the smart one. He accepted it and used it as a ladder straight out of the house. He left at 17 for college for 100 miles away and rarely came back. He wasn't especially cruel to me. He also wasn't kind. He was absent. And I learned something important early in life. Absence can be its own kind of agreement. A label isn't just a word. It's a set of permissions. It tells everyone around you how much room you're allowed to take up, how much care you're worth, how visible you get to be. My family wrote mine when I was 6, and every year after that, they renewed it. If you really want to know how a family sees you, don't ask what they say. Count the photographs. In our living room, my mother had arranged 14 framed family photos above the couch. Gallery style, balanced and centered. Jolene appeared in all 14. Caleb was in 6. I was in 3. In one, I was half hidden behind a cousin at a 4th of July picnic. In another, the frame cut off part of my face like no one noticed I was slipping out of sight. In the third, I was 5 years old, squinting into the sun and holding a red balloon. That one stayed on the wall because the balloon matched the sofa cushions. Every family photo session followed the same pattern. Jolene in front, Caleb to the left. Faith moved back a little. And I always did. One step back, then another, until I became background. At Jolene's high school graduation, my mother took 47 pictures. I know that because I saw the camera roll on her phone later. 47. Different poses, different angles. Smiling, laughing, cap toss, family shots, close-ups. At my graduation 2 years later, she took one photo. I was holding my diploma. I had graduated with honors. The ceremony lasted 2 hours. One photo. That summer, I started carrying a disposable camera everywhere. The yellow Kodak kind. 27 exposures. I took pictures of myself at every milestone. My first apartment. My first drafting table. The day I passed my licensing exam. I kept all of them in a shoebox under my bed. Because when nobody else documents your life, you learn to become your own witness. You learn that if you don't preserve yourself, you disappear. And I had been disappearing for a very long time. I left home at 18 on a scholarship to the State University's architecture program. My mother's response was instant, sharp, and dismissive. Architecture? That's not really a career for someone like you. Someone like you.
That was how she spoke about me.
As if I were a category, not a daughter. At the time, I still didn't know she had once studied architecture herself. I didn't know that every time I used that word, something in her tightened. That understanding would come later. My father drove me to campus. 3.5 hours on I-81. Windows down. Radio off. He was never a talkative man. He had spent 2 decades in a house where my mother's voice drowned out everyone else's, and eventually silence became his native language. But when he pulled up to my dorm and lifted my suitcase to the curb, he looked at me and said 6 words I have carried ever since. Build something they can't ignore. That was it. The only real instruction he ever gave me. I hugged him. He held on longer than usual. Then he got back into the car and drove away. I didn't see him again until Thanksgiving. That first night in my dorm, I taped my shoebox pictures to the wall. My roommate, a girl named Tara from Baltimore, looked at them and asked about my family. What I said was, "They're fine." What I meant was, I just drove 3.5 hours to get away from them, and for the first time in my life, I can breathe. I built my career the same way old buildings are restored, slowly, patiently, one layer at a time. In my junior year, I got an unpaid internship at the State Historic Preservation Office. At night, I worked at a diner called Rosie's near campus. Coffee and eggs from 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning. Then back up at 7 for the preservation office. The money was bad. The diner smelled like grease. I was always tired. But the preservation office had an archive of historic structures from across the state, and I read everything I could get my hands on. My first major project came when I was 25, a 1920s Carnegie Library in a mill town in western Pennsylvania. The roof had caved in. The town council wanted to tear it down. I wrote a 32-page proposal arguing for restoration. They gave me 6 months and a budget so small it barely covered what demolition would have cost. I made it work anyway. Reclaimed lumber. Volunteer labor from the local high school shop class. Some nights I slept in my car because the nearest motel was too far away and I couldn't afford the extra gas. The library reopened on a Saturday in October. The town voted to name the reading room after me. I was 26 years old. By 28, I had started my own studio. Just 3 people, including me. We specialized in restoring courthouses, churches, post offices, the bones of small towns other people had already given up on. By 32, one of our courthouse restorations in West Virginia won a state preservation award. Regional journals wrote about it, then national ones. My family never knew. Or maybe more accurately, they never asked. I stopped volunteering information after one Thanksgiving when I mentioned a published article about my work, and my mother replied, "That's nice, honey. Jolene just bought a 4-bedroom." So, I built everything in silence. Not because I wanted secrecy, because no one had ever made room for my story. I was 16 when I first began to understand my mother. School ended early one afternoon, and I came home to an empty house. My mother was at work. Jolene was at cheer practice. Caleb was at robotics club. I went up to the attic looking for a box of encyclopedias my father had told me was up there for a history project. The attic smelled like dust and old cardboard. Boxes were stacked everywhere, labeled in my mother's handwriting: holiday decorations, tax returns, baby clothes. In the far corner, I found one marked, Diane College. I opened it. Inside was a green spiral sketchbook. I flipped it open and froze. There were drawings everywhere. Floor plans, elevations, pencil sketches traced in ink. A Victorian house with a wraparound porch. A storefront with arched windows. A church steeple with handwritten notes about roof pitch and load-bearing walls. They weren't just decent. They were good. Not good for a student.
Good.
The kind of work done by someone who understood not only how a building should look, but how it should stand. I sat on that attic floor for a long time with that sketchbook in my lap, and I understood something before I had the language for it. Every time I talked about architecture, my mother wasn't seeing me. She was seeing the life she lost. Every drafting class I excelled in, every design competition, every mention of school, she didn't hear her daughter becoming something. She heard the echo of who she might have been. I put the sketchbook back and never told her I had found it. People think leaving home fixes everything. That distance gives you perspective. That success rewrites the past. It doesn't. Families have long memories when it comes to your role, and very short memories when it comes to who you became. 2 years before the reunion, I drove 4 hours to my parents' house for Thanksgiving because my father asked me to come. He always asked. My mother never did. Jolene was in the kitchen showing off her newly renovated home. Quartz counters. Farmhouse sink. Subway tile backsplash. My mother ran her hand across the countertop like she was admiring a museum piece. Jolene, this is gorgeous. You've always had such taste. I sat at the table with a cup of coffee. During a quiet moment, I mentioned that a courthouse project I led in West Virginia had just won a state preservation award. Silence. A full 2 seconds of nothing. Then my mother said, "That's nice. Can you pass the cranberries?" Jolene leaned on the counter and asked, "So, is that like flipping houses?" I said, "No, not really." She tilted her head and shrugged. "Sounds kind of like a hobby." After dinner, I helped with dishes. My mother stood at the sink while Patricia dried plates beside her. They thought I was in the other room. I wasn't. I was standing right behind them, reaching for a towel. My mother said, in that quiet voice she used when she thought she was being subtle, "At least she's keeping busy. I just wish she'd do something about." Then she waved her hand in front of her own face. She didn't even need to say it anymore. Patricia laughed. I gripped the dish towel so tightly my fingers hurt. Then I finished the dishes, got in my car, and drove 4 hours home in the dark. 6 months later, my father had a stroke. A minor one, the doctors said. He lost some movement on his left side, but he kept his speech. I drove to the hospital the night it happened. When I walked into his room, my mother and Jolene were already there. My mother looked up and said, "Oh, you came." Not warmly, just surprised, like I had shown up somewhere I wasn't expected. I stayed for 3 days. While my father recovered, I helped organize his home office, insurance documents, medication lists, bills, desk drawers. That's when I found it. A thick manila folder in the bottom drawer, held shut with a rubber band. Inside were articles about me, press clippings, blog printouts, award announcements, small-town newspaper features, a scanned copy of the West Virginia preservation article. A printed image of the restored library. The folder covered 8 years. 8 years. He had been collecting them since my first published project. Some of the printouts had ridiculously long website addresses wrapped across 3 lines, which meant he had sat there at his slow home computer, typing them in 1 character at a time. He had never shown my mother. He had never mentioned it to me. He had just quietly kept proof. I sat on the floor of his office with that folder in my lap and felt the weight of 8 years of silent belief. Later, when he saw me holding it, he didn't say anything. He just nodded once. My father never gave speeches, but he kept the receipts. By July, the heat had settled in thick and heavy. The annual Mercer family reunion was held, as always, at my grandmother's old house. She had passed away 3 years earlier, and my mother inherited it. She insisted on continuing the reunion every summer, not because she loved tradition, because she loved an audience. I hadn't gone in 2 years. This time, I went for my father. The stroke had slowed him down. He walked with a cane now. His left hand curled when he was tired. He still drove to the barber every 2 weeks. Still sat on the porch with the newspaper. But something in his face had changed. A tiredness. A resignation. He asked me to come.
So I did.
At the same time, something important had been developing in my professional life. For about 3 months, I had been emailing with Nora Whitfield, senior features editor at American Preservation magazine. She was working on a multi-part series about preservation architects in rural America, and she wanted me to be the centerpiece. We had gone back and forth about scheduling, photography, projects, interviews. In one email, I mentioned I'd be in Hadley for a family gathering that weekend and told her about an 1890s train depot nearby she might want to see. She replied, "I might just take you up on that." I didn't think much of it.
People say things like that all the time.
I pulled into the gravel driveway at noon. The yard was already full: pickup trucks, minivans, a few out-of-state sedans. Folding tables stretched across the lawn. Coolers lined the fence. Smoke drifted up from the grill. Someone's children were already screaming in the yard. I sat in my car for 3 full minutes before getting out. I counted my breaths. In for 4. Out for 6. A trick I'd learned in therapy years earlier. Then I walked in. The welcome told me everything. When Jolene arrived with her husband and kids, people lit up. "Jolene, you look amazing." My mother took one of the grandkids onto her hip and glowed. When I arrived, I got nods. "Hey, Faith." "Oh, hi." Uncle Ray gave me a real smile and said, "Good to see you, Faith." He sounded like he meant it. Patricia didn't even look up from the potato salad. My mother spotted me from the main table and said, "Oh, Faith, you made it. I wasn't sure you were coming." She said it with the performative surprise of someone greeting a neighbor who wandered into the wrong backyard. I found my father in a lawn chair beneath the big oak tree at the edge of the yard, away from the noise. His cane leaned against the armrest. A glass of water sat in the grass beside him. I sat next to him.
He squeezed my hand. Nothing else needed to be said.
Near the front entrance was a table of pre-written name tags. Everyone had one.
Except me.
There was one blank tag and a marker waiting. I wrote my own name. 42 people at that reunion. I was the only one who had to identify herself. My mother had arranged place cards at the main table in neat, cursive handwriting.
Diane.
Gerald. Jolene. Marcus. Patricia.
Ray.
I looked through every card. Mine wasn't there. Not at the main table. Not at the second table. Not at the third. So I sat at the folding table with the children. Between a 7-year-old stacking chips into a tower and a 10-year-old playing games on someone's phone. From the kids' table, I could see everything. Jolene's husband was talking about their vacation property on the lake. My mother leaned in, proud and interested, hanging on every detail. A cousin I barely recognized asked me, "So, what do you do again?" Before I could answer, Patricia called out from across the yard. "She does something with old buildings. Fixes them up or whatever."
"I'm an architect," I said.
Patricia waved a hand. Right. Like those home makeover shows." "Not exactly." My mother, without even turning around, said, "Jolene, tell everyone about the beach house." I ate quietly. Potato salad, a slightly undercooked hamburger, weak lemonade. I watched the same family choreography I had watched all my life. Same roles, same script, same hierarchy. What I didn't know was that someone else was about to witness it too. If you've ever been seated at the kids' table while the adults acted like you barely existed, I see you. Being ignored doesn't mean you have no value. It just means the people around you stopped paying attention. And if this story is hitting home, leave a like so more people who need it can find it. After lunch, everyone drifted into the living room where the old photo albums were kept. 3 large binders, leather covers, plastic sleeves that crackled when you turned the pages. The next hour was a chorus of nostalgia. Remember when Jolene won Junior Miss? Remember when Caleb went to regionals for the science fair? Remember that beach trip when Jolene wore that little sailor outfit? I stood in the doorway and watched page after page go by. Photos of pageants, trophies, vacations, smiling family moments. Across roughly 200 pictures, I appeared in 4. In one, I was hidden behind a taller cousin. In another, I stood at the edge of the frame like I was already halfway gone. In the third, someone's thumb covered half my face. And in the fourth, the one I couldn't stop looking at, I was 10 years old, standing behind a potted plant in a hand-me-down dress while no one in the picture was looking at me. No one noticed. No one said, "Why is Faith barely in any of these?" No one flipped through 200 photos and registered that one member of the family had been quietly erased from the visual record. Jolene was such a gorgeous child, Patricia said, running her finger across a pageant photo. She really was, my mother replied. Carefully, so no one would see, I slid that photo of me at 10 out of its sleeve and tucked it into my back pocket. For photos in 34 years. And even in those, I was disappearing. I needed air. Or silence. Preferably both. I left the living room and walked down the hall into what used to be my grandmother's study. After she died, it had become a storage room. Boxes on the desk. Winter coats hanging from the curtain rod. A dusty sewing machine in the corner. On a shelf above the desk, I saw a box labeled in my father's handwriting. Family, to sort. I pulled it down. Inside were decades of loose photographs, church bulletins, holiday cards, and old envelopes. I wasn't looking for anything. I was hiding. But then I found them. A stack of glossy prints from my college graduation. 15 of them. I knew my mother had taken exactly 1 photo that day. I had counted, but my father had taken 15. Different angles. Me crossing the stage. Me holding my diploma. Me with Tara, my roommate. Me alone in my cap and gown, smiling directly at the camera with my whole face open and bright. He had used a disposable Kodak camera, the same kind I started carrying that year. Those pictures had sat in that box for 12 years. Unframed, unshared, unspoken. I turned over the envelope they had come in. In my father's handwriting it said, Faith's big day. I sat in that dusty room holding 15 photographs of the daughter my mother acted like had nothing worth celebrating. I studied my own face in those pictures. I was not ugly. I was radiant. I slipped the graduation photos into my back pocket next to the photo of 10-year-old me behind the plant. My pockets were getting heavy. I took a breath, smoothed my shirt, and walked back outside. The light had softened by then into that golden, forgiving color that comes just before evening. Kids were running through the sprinkler. The grill had gone quiet. Someone had put country music on a Bluetooth speaker too loud for anyone over 50. Then a silver sedan I didn't recognize pulled into the driveway. Out stepped a woman in a linen blazer, white blouse, dark slacks, carrying a leather portfolio. She looked like she belonged in a city office, not a backyard reunion. It was Nora Whitfield. She had driven 90 minutes from her hotel. When she spotted me, she smiled and walked over.
Faith.
You actually came. I told you I would. You did. She glanced around the yard. I want to see the train depot, but I also brought the layout proofs for the feature. I thought maybe we could go over them. If this is a bad time, I can come back. I looked around at my family. My mother repositioning desserts. Jolene taking selfies. Patricia refreshing her drink and scanning for gossip. It's always a bad time here, I said. Come on. I led Nora to the kids' table. We sat down. She opened her portfolio and spread out glossy prints of my completed projects. The courthouse, the library, the Ohio church. Full color, professional layouts. The first person in my life who had ever willingly sat at the kids' table with me. It took Patricia about 12 minutes to notice. She walked over with her visor pushed back and that familiar social smile stretched across her face. Well, hello. Are you a friend of someone's? I started to answer. Aunt Patricia, this is Nora. She's. Patricia cut me off. She turned to Nora, laughed lightly, and delivered the line she had clearly said many times before. This is the one we don't talk about. She said it like a joke, like a cute family line, like it was harmless. Nora's face didn't harden. It stilled. She looked at Patricia, then at me, then back at Patricia.
I'm sorry, she said.
What did you just say? Patricia laughed again because doubling down was her favorite strategy. Oh, it's just family teasing. Every family has one, right? The quiet one, the plain one. She made that dismissive little wave with her hand. Nora didn't smile. She set her coffee down slowly. By then my mother had noticed a stranger at my table and walked over, polite only because there was an outsider present. Who is your friend, Faith? Before I could speak, Nora said, I'll introduce myself in just a moment, if that's all right. I'd like to do it when everyone is listening.
The air changed.
Something was coming. Nora leaned toward me and asked quietly, May I show them? I looked at her. They won't care. I'm not asking if they'll care, she said. I'm asking if you'll let me. I looked across the yard. My father under the oak tree. My mother managing the dessert table like a production set. Jolene posing for pictures. Patricia circling the crowd like she owned it. 34 years of the same story. I nodded once. Nora stood, straightened her blazer, picked up her portfolio, and walked to the main table with the calm confidence of someone used to commanding a room. Excuse me, she said. Not loudly, just clearly. I know this is a family gathering, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but may I have everyone's attention for one moment? The yard quieted in stages. First the adults, then the second table, then the children near the sprinkler. Someone lowered the music. 42 people turned toward a woman they didn't know. My mother's smile froze. Patricia lowered her cup. Nora reached into her pocket, took out a business card, and handed it to my mother. My name is Nora Whitfield. I'm the senior features editor at American Preservation magazine. My mother looked at the card, then back at Nora. Nora said, I drove 90 minutes to be here today, not for the reunion. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. I'm here because of her.
And she pointed at me.
Not dramatically, just clearly, like identifying a fact. The yard went silent. The kind of silence where you can hear ice shifting in a cooler 20 feet away. Nora opened her portfolio and held up the first photo, the restored courthouse in West Virginia, sunlight hitting the limestone facade. This building was scheduled for demolition 3 years ago. Your daughter saved it. The restoration won the State Preservation Award. Then the second photo, the Carnegie Library. She led this restoration at 25. The town named the reading room after her. Then the church in Ohio. 63 families wrote to us asking us to feature the architect who saved their church. She laid the photographs across the table where everyone could see them. My mother stared at them like they were objects from another country. Jolene's phone, for the first time all day, was face down on the table. Then Nora looked at my mother, at Patricia, and at the rest of the family. Faith Mercer is one of the most important preservation architects working in America today. She has restored 11 buildings across 4 states. She will be our October cover story. Then she paused and finished with, and she is your family. I assumed you knew. I have never seen devastation delivered so politely. I assumed you knew. My mother recovered first because she always did. Of course we knew, she said brightly. Too brightly. We've always been proud of Faith. The smile on her face never reached her eyes. I said nothing. I watched my mother rewrite history in front of people who had watched her diminish me for decades, and none of them looked especially shocked. Patricia rushed to repair herself too. Oh, I was only teasing earlier. Faith knows I adore her. She reached for my arm. I took one step back. Her hand closed on empty air. Jolene crossed her arms. I mean, we knew she did renovation stuff. She never really talked about it. Nora said nothing. She didn't have to. She just stood there and let the truth sit where everyone could see it. Then a teenage girl, my cousin Samantha, 16 years old, someone I had met maybe twice, walked over dripping from the sprinkler and stared at the photos. Wait, she said. Aunt Faith, a town named a room after you? I looked at her and smiled for the first time that day. They did. That is so cool. It was such a simple, honest response that it nearly broke me. My mother cornered me near the kitchen screen door after the crowd loosened. She always saved the cruelest conversations for private corners where no one else could hear. Why would you do this? She asked in a low, controlled voice. Why would you bring a stranger here to humiliate me? I didn't bring her to humiliate anyone, I said. She came because she believes my work matters. Your work, my mother repeated, like the phrase itself offended her. Do you know what I gave up so you could go to that school? I sacrificed everything for this family. There it was. The script. The one where every achievement of mine had to be translated into a wound of hers. You gave up architecture when you got pregnant with Jolene, I said. I know. I found your sketchbook. The color drained out of her face instantly. Not gradually. All at once. She stared at me. That is none of your business. You were talented, Mom. You really were. I kept my voice calm, but that wasn't my fault. She had no answer to that. No prepared line. No defense. No performance. Because there is no script for being seen clearly. She turned, walked into the bathroom, and locked the door. The woman who had spent 34 years making me invisible had just disappeared herself. I know what some of you are thinking. How can a mother resent her own daughter for following the same dream she lost? Family patterns don't make sense from the outside. They only make sense to the people trapped inside them. Jolene found me on the porch a little later, arms crossed, backlit by the kitchen light, already wearing the expression of someone about to say something unfair in a very reasonable tone. You know, she said, you could have just told us your projects were this big. I did, I said. Thanksgiving. 2 years ago. You called it a hobby. She blinked. I didn't know it was like this. That's the point.
You didn't ask.
She shifted and tried a different angle. Look, we're sisters. Can we not do this right now? Everyone's watching. I looked at her. Everyone has been watching my whole life. That's the problem. Her eyes filled with tears. Not guilt. Embarrassment. Jolene had spent 36 years believing she was the center of the family story. The pretty one. The admired one. The one with the place card at the main table. She wasn't upset because she had hurt me. She was upset because the spotlight had moved. Then she said, "Why do you always have to make everything about you?" I let the silence answer her for a second. Then I said, "You've had 36 years of everything being about you. I'm having one afternoon." She stared at me, speechless, then turned and went back inside. I stayed on the porch, listening to the screen door slam and the first fireflies start flickering over the yard. Patricia made one final attempt too, but not with me, with Nora. After spending 20 minutes regrouping and reapplying lipstick, she approached Nora near the dessert table with her hostess smile fully repaired. "Well, Ms. Whitfield, what a lovely surprise. I've always told Faith she was special. She's very talented." Nora looked at her with the cool precision of an editor reading a weak draft. "Did you? Because about 20 minutes ago, you introduced her as the one you don't talk about." The sentence dropped like glass breaking. Patricia flushed from the throat upward. That was a joke. Just an inside joke. Inside jokes usually make everyone laugh, Nora said. She didn't smile. She didn't raise her voice. She just told the truth and left it there. From across the yard came Uncle Ray's voice. "Pat, sit down." 2 words. Quiet. Final. The first time in 40 years of marriage he had ever corrected Patricia in public. She stared at him. He didn't look away. And Patricia sat. For the first time in my memory, she went silent, not strategic silence, not wounded silence. Real silence. The silence that comes when you realize the room has finally seen you accurately. Two of my cousins, women around my age who had grown up around the same hierarchy, came over and sat near me without saying much. Close enough for me to feel the bench shift. That mattered. Nora, meanwhile, continued showing photos and explaining my work to the people who had gathered. A post office in eastern Kentucky from 1887 that the county wanted demolished for parking. A one-room schoolhouse in Tennessee with original hand-blown glass windows. A community center in Alabama that I restored pro bono because the neighborhood couldn't afford an architect. Then Nora said something I will never forget. The common thread in Faith's work is that she sees value in things other people have given up on. She didn't look at my mother when she said it. She didn't need to. My mother had come back out by then and stood in the kitchen doorway, arms at her sides, watching. Jolene sat at the main table alone, her phone still face down. For the first time I could remember, she wasn't the center of anything. And I was still sitting at the kids' table. Except now, people were choosing to sit with me. The yard had split into quiet factions, the way families do when the truth is finally spoken aloud. Some gathered around my mother, the ones who had benefited from the old hierarchy. Others drifted toward me carefully, like people approaching a building they had been told was condemned, only to discover it was still standing. I sat there for a while listening to snippets around me. She never told us. 11 buildings? An October cover story? I had no idea. And I thought about what I could do with that moment. I could have walked to the center of the yard and listed every injury, every combined birthday, every hand-me-down dress, every photo I was cropped from, every time ugly was spoken over me like a sentence. I could have exposed all of it. But that's not who I had become. I restore things. I don't destroy them. So, I made two decisions. I would talk to my father, and then I would leave. I found Nora near her car. "Thank you for coming," I said. She shook her head gently. "I didn't come for drama. I came because your work deserves to be seen. The magazine piece is running no matter what your family thinks." "I know." She handed me a folder. The final layout proofs for the feature, marked with editorial notes. "Look them over when you're ready." I set them on the passenger seat of my car, then turned and walked back across the yard. This time, everyone watched me. Not because I was the ugly one, because I mattered. My father was still beneath the oak tree, hands resting on his cane, eyes fixed on the yard. He had barely moved through the whole thing. He looked like a man who had spent years wanting to speak and forgotten how. His eyes were wet. I pulled a chair up beside him, sat down, and took his hand, the one curled slightly from the stroke. "I found the photos in the study, Dad," I said. "The graduation ones." His chin trembled. 15 photos, I said. "You took 15. A few seconds passed. Then, so quietly I had to lean closer, he said. "Should have been more." I took one of the graduation photos from my pocket, the one where I'm 22, smiling directly into the camera, proud and open and fully there. "And I found the folder in your desk, too," I said. 8 years of clippings. He squeezed my hand. "I should have said something," he whispered. "Should have fought harder for you. You kept the receipts, Dad." I placed the graduation photo in his hand. "Put this one in the living room," I told him. "Not in a box." He looked at it for a long time, ran his thumb across the glossy edge, then nodded. The same quiet nod from the hospital. The one that meant everything he didn't know how to say. Then my mother came across the yard like a storm front. You could see it in her face before she even reached us. Set jaw. Tight shoulders. Hard steps in the grass. Faith Eleanor Mercer. My full name. The weapon of mothers who believe naming you completely means they still own you. You come to my family reunion and bring a stranger here to humiliate me? I stood up. "No one humiliated you, Mom. Nora came to discuss my work." "Your work," she snapped. "Everything you have, every opportunity, came because I raised you. I fed you. I clothed you." "You clothed Jolene," I said. You gave me what was left. I treated you all the same. She said it loudly enough for the yard to hear. The biggest lie in our family, repeated so often she may have believed it. There are 3 photos of me on that wall, Mom. 14 of Jolene. You did not treat us the same. Her voice shook. You were always difficult. Always sensitive. Always making everything about yourself. I felt the words pass through me without landing. They had no weight anymore. I did not make myself the ugly one, I said.
You did.
And you made sure everyone else knew it. Silence. 40 people heard it. No one interrupted. My mother's face collapsed, but not into remorse. Into self-pity. She started crying. Not because she understood what she had done. Because she had been seen doing it. After everything I sacrificed for this family, she said, "This is how you repay me?" "I'm not repaying anything," I said. "I'm leaving." My voice never rose. Not once. She was the one shaking. She was the one yelling.
I was simply standing there.
Then I turned and walked away. The grass felt soft beneath my shoes. The light had gone fully amber now, that beautiful golden hour that makes everything look gentler than it really is. Near her car, Nora handed me an envelope. "The formal offer letter," she said. "October cover feature. We'll need you in New York in September for the photo shoot." I took it and said, "Thank you, Nora. For all of it." She smiled and said, "Thank your buildings. They did the talking." I looked back at the yard one last time. Patricia sat alone in a lawn chair near the fence, visor off, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Jolene stood at the far side of the yard texting, her back turned to everyone. My mother was surrounded by 2 aunts performing concern with all the loudness and emptiness they brought to everything else. Uncle Ray met my eyes from across the grass and gave me a small nod. So did Samantha, who came running over, barefoot and breathless. "Aunt Faith," she said, "can I come see one of the buildings sometime? Like for real?" I looked at her. Wet hair, bright eyes, no agenda. "Anytime," I said. "I'll give you the tour myself." She hugged me hard and ran back to the sprinkler. On the ground near the main table was Nora's business card, the one she had handed my mother. No one had picked it up. I walked past it. Some things are worth restoring. Some things you leave where they fell. I got in my car and placed the envelope on the passenger seat next to the layout proofs. On top of them, I set one of the graduation photos. "One for me, one for you," my father had said. A fair trade between 2 quiet people. I pulled out of the driveway without looking in the rearview mirror. The highway opened up in front of me, long and empty in that summer evening way that feels almost holy. Windows down. No radio. The wind was enough. The silence was enough. About 50 miles later, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. 2 words. "Proud always." I pulled onto the shoulder and read it twice. Then a 3rd time. My eyes blurred, and I realized I was crying. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, set the phone down, and kept driving. I had spent 34 years trying to prove I was worth seeing. Turns out I never needed proof. I just needed to stop asking for it from the people who were committed to looking away. Around mile 90, I passed an old abandoned gas station off the highway. Boarded windows. Vines climbing the roof. Weeds cracking through the concrete. Most people would have driven past without a second thought. I slowed down, studied the roofline, the framing, the bones underneath the neglect, and I smiled. That one might be worth saving. 3 months later, the October issue came out. My face was on the cover. The same face my family had called ugly for 34 years. On the cover of a national architecture magazine. I stood in front of the restored courthouse in West Virginia. Not smiling, not posing, just standing there, arms at my sides, looking straight into the camera.
Steady. Present.
Accounted for. My father framed the cover and hung it in the living room beside Jolene's graduation photo. My mother didn't take it down. She didn't acknowledge it either. It just stayed there. A quiet fact in a house built on denial. Jolene texted me once. "Saw the magazine. Congratulations." I replied, "Thank you." Nothing else. Patricia never contacted me again. Uncle Ray sent a handwritten letter on yellow legal pad paper. Should have said something years ago. Sorry doesn't cover it, but it's all I have. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer beside my father's folder. My mother never called. Not once. I didn't wait. That Thanksgiving, I didn't go to my parents' house. Instead, I drove to that old gas station I had noticed from the highway. I walked the property, measured the walls, took photographs from every angle. The next Monday, I submitted a pro bono restoration proposal to the county. Community space. A building no one was looking at in a place everyone passed by. I understood that kind of building. Late one afternoon in my studio, golden light filled the room. The same amber light as the reunion. The shoebox still sat on my shelf, the same one from college, now patched at one corner with tape. Inside were the photographs I had taken of myself when no one else did. My first apartment. My first drafting table. My licensing exam day. I added 2 more. The magazine cover. And the before photo of the gas station. Then I added one last picture. The photo of 10-year-old me standing behind the plant in the hand-me-down dress. I held it in one hand. Small girl. Big plant. Nobody looking at her. Then I held the magazine cover in the other. 34-year-old woman. Standing alone. Fully seen. Same girl, I said to the empty room. Same girl. I placed the 2 photos side by side in the shoebox, closed the lid, and set it back on the shelf above my desk. Some people keep trophies. I keep proof that I was here. And here's what I know now. You cannot repair a family that does not want to heal. But you can build a life that stands without their approval. Every building I have ever saved began the same way. Someone looked at it and said it was worthless. Then someone else looked closer, saw the structure, saw the craftsmanship,
Saw what was still there beneath the damage.
I was never the ugly one. I was just standing in the wrong room. That's my story. 34 years of labels. One stranger with a business card. And a shoebox full of proof that I was always worth seeing. If this story reminded you of your own, share it with someone who needs it. Leave a comment. And subscribe for more.